Everyone's super excited for this encounter. Nodirbek Abdusattorov, the super talent from Uzbekistan, is here. He's come to the game in a very happy mood. You can see him smiling there and now adjusting his pieces. He has the white pieces against none other than the world champion Domaraju Gukesh. Nodirbek has been in tremendous form in this tournament. He's on 4 out of 5 and they had a rest day, and after this is the 6th round. So 3 wins and 2 draws for Nodirbek as Gukesh comes in. They shake hands. Gukesh is on 3.5 out of 5. He's also playing quite well. 2 wins and 3 draws for him. And this will be a massive encounter. We all know the amazing rivalry that these two players have between themselves, starting from the Chennai Olympiad and then moving on to various tournaments. Whenever Gukesh and Nodirbek face each other, we can be rest assured that it will be a huge fight. You can see Gukesh with his ritual there of putting his jacket behind his chair, writing down his score sheet and then adjusting his pieces. Meanwhile, Nodirbek is ready. We are at Vaikanze Tata Steel and you can see the spectators in the distance. There is a gong that is also rung before the game. The gong is hit and there you can see Peter Doggers there to your left in the background, who's going to do the honors, and the game is about to begin. There we go. Handshake. And what is Nodirbek's first move going to be? He opens with 1 e4. Gukesh responds back with the super solid e5. And this is logical because this would also be his world championship prep. The knight comes out to f3 and knight to c6 played. And now Nodirbek plays his bishop out to c4, the Italian. And Gukesh also brings his bishop out to c5. We are in mainline Italian territory. The main moves here are castles and d3 and c3. But Nodirbek goes for a4, an early a4. Very few games have been played in this position. In fact, only 69 games have continued with a4. Knight f6. Gukesh responds back pretty quickly. d3. There's a high chance that we would simply reach a well-known position. d6 if white castles here. But instead of doing that, Nodirbek pushes his pawn to a5, gaining more space. Now, one of the main moves in this position is a6, trying to stop the pawn from moving even further. But Gukesh goes for a check. And he tells Nodirbek, if you play c3, I'm simply going to snatch the pawn here and get back. So Nodirbek plays bishop d2. They trade. And now knight takes d2 has been played here. So the position looks pretty simplified here, one must agree, because black's knights are well placed. The bishop is opened up opposite to the pawn chain. However, the engines do give white a very small edge. And it feels like Nodirbek has made this deep prep where he's understood here what is the way in which he should be playing. Knight e7, a typical maneuver in such positions where you want to put your knight back on g6. c3 played by Nodirbek, just trying to expand either with b4 or d4. And Gukesh goes knight to g6, logical move, defending the pawn, looking at the f4 square, and rook comes to e1. How is Gukesh going to continue now? He plays his pawn to h6. A useful move, just in general. Taking control of the g5 square. And he gets up. But Nodirbek now pushes his pawn to d4, calmly pressing the clock. He has still 1 hour 39 minutes, which shows he's still in his prep. He's not taking time for his moves. And Gukesh goes knight to h7. Maybe he wants to trade off a pair of knights. He also wants to think about bringing queen to f6. But look at that. Rook comes up to e3. Amazing. This move is something really that is worthy of investigation. Knight to g5 played. Rook on e3 is something which Nodirbek feels is the right place for the rook, which is why he's put it there. And now he starts to think knight takes g5 taken. If you play pawn takes, I can go g3 followed by queen h5 being threatened. If you go g4, I have h3, and the position remains complicated, but white seems to be slightly better. So he is taken, and I think it makes sense if Gukesh picks it back with the queen. Yes, takes it, queen takes g5. And now in order to dominate this knight on g6, Nodirbek pushes the pawn to g3. And with his rook here and pawn to g3, the knight of course doesn't have too much scope. And Gukesh goes bishop to g4, attacking the queen. Well, you can move the queen away, you can bring your bishop back to e2. But Nodirbek plays pawn to h4. What a move this is. The main point being, if queen takes e3, then Gukesh has prepared this amazing move. Nodirbek has prepared this amazing move, queen c2, and the queen is trapped. Insane. So he goes queen h5 and puts his queen on a useful square. Nodirbek brings the queen out to b3. There's some pressure on the f7 point. There's some pressure on the b7 point. And Gukesh plays rook to b8, defending the b7 pawn. And now this beautiful move, knight f1. I like this move because he's preparing knight to h2. Maybe there is knight f4 here, because if you take, I have ef4 and then you can reroute the knight. But Gukesh goes knight to e7. And he feels like now the knight suddenly belongs on c6, putting pressure in the center. Knight h2 by Nodirbek. He's like, if you come to c6, I'll just play my bishop to e2. He plays bishop d7, keeping the bishop on the board. And now the bishop comes back to e2, attacking the queen. Wow. Queen g6. And he takes on e5. Well, he could have even played queen c4 here, but taking on e5 makes a lot of sense. Takes here. And you will see that white is the one totally better here after rook d1. Because if the bishop doesn't remain on this diagonal and plays bishop c6, then knight g4, and there's no way to defend this pawn. There's no f6, queen can't come here, and so Gukesh keeps his bishop on this diagonal. He plays bishop e6, also controlling the g4 square, and now the queen enters in. Queen to b5, attacking the pawn on e5. f6 is a possible move, but he goes knight c6. But this allows white to gain more space on the queen side with the move a6. Fine move. You can't take the pawn. The knight is hanging. And Gukesh gets his bishop back to c8. Again, a very interesting move. The queen now defends the knight. Also, AB is met with rook b7 perhaps. h5 played, attacking the queen. He brings his queen to f6. Knight g4 will be taken. So he goes rook f3. Another great move here by Nodirbek, attacking the queen. And the queen comes to e6. Just moving, surviving here one move at a time for Gukesh. Nodirbek brings the bishop into the position. Very powerful chess. The bishop is now well placed. The rook is amazingly placed. The rook on d1 is well placed. The pressure with the queen and the pawn here. Queen goes back to e7. Gukesh has 25 minutes. Nodirbek 33 minutes here. And now queen a4. Maybe not the most accurate move. Here rook f d3 would have been great, trying to put pressure down the d file. But queen a4 gives Gukesh much needed respite. Knight d8, a good move. He takes a b7. And now bishop b7, attacking the pawn on e4. So there's no time to take here because knight e6, rook a8, this pawn is weak. So that's the reason why he defends it with rook e3. But slowly it seems like black is finding some coordination in his position. He plays his bishop to c6. Again, taking the pawn, rook a8 traps the queen. So you can't do that. He comes back, queen a2. And now Nodirbek just gets up. Gukesh plays his knight to b7. And he realizes that he wants to put his knight on the d6 square, where it would block the d file and would be very nicely placed. And that's what he does. Knight to d6 here. The bishop comes in and offers a trade, and I think this trade is in the favor of white, because after bishop takes bishop, and most likely rook takes. Now the pawns on c7 and a7 are pretty weak. So Gukesh goes queen e6. Once again making use of tactics. If queen a7, there is knight e4, and then the rook is hanging on d5. So Nodirbek brings his rook back to e2 and c6 played. Rook comes to a5. The queen is traded. Rook takes. So while the position has become almost equal here, with Gukesh's excellent move rook fc8, now with the idea of pushing pawn to c5, Nodirbek still has this little pressure, this very slight initiative. The reason for that is that this pawn on h5 is just clamping down the black structure. That's the main thing. And Gukesh pushes the pawn to c5. He's simplifying stuff. B takes c5. Rook takes c5. And rook takes a7. He takes the pawn on c3. And now e5 pawn is hanging. But if you take here, then I can go rook e8 and put pressure down the e file. And 40 moves have also been completed. So both sides have now enough time. Rook d7 played here by Nodirbek. A powerful move trying to put pressure on the knight. I think knight c4 makes sense to defend the pawn here. But Gukesh goes knight e8 and this is slightly passive. He intends to put his knight on f6. That's what he wants to do, attacking the rook and the pawn, but Nodirbek just snatches the pawn and says thank you so much. Nodirbek played an amazing opening and early middle game, but now Gukesh is back. However, Nodirbek is putting once again the pressure. If rook takes f7, rook e8 is feasible. So that's the reason why again rook e7 keeping the position. If knight takes pawn, knight f7 is better for white. So he plays rook to b4. Very interesting move. And I love how Nodirbek is pushing forward g4. You can't take here because if I take, check, and this is winning for white. So that's the reason why after rook b4, g4, Gukesh goes rook c5. And now f3. So white is now a very solid pawn up. But important for Gukesh now to play rook b3 to attack this and provoke king g2. But he goes king f8. A losing move here. Because now he can take check. Of course, Gukesh has calculated after king e8 that the knight is hanging and also if it moves the rook is hanging. However, Nodirbek has a fantastic move here. And he finds it, knight d3. So if the rook is taken, you simply take any of the rooks and you are 2 pawns up and completely winning. But Gukesh first removes one of his rooks with a check. King comes up to g2. And now this rook is hanging on c5. So he plays rook c3 and attacks the knight. So that the rook is hanging, the knight is hanging. He plays his knight to e5 calmly, defending his rook again. And Gukesh comes back and attacks the knight. So it's becoming kind of a cat and mouse fight here. Now the knight cannot be saved. So the only move that is there at Nodirbek's disposal is to take the pawn, and he does it. Rook g7. Gukesh takes the knight. But this is just a huge position for white because these 4 pawns are just super strong. And now Nodirbek brings the rook in. He is threatening mate with rook a8 check. And at this point, Gukesh is under tremendous pressure. He has 17 minutes on the clock. Nodirbek has 36. He goes king f8, attacking the rook on g7. But rook g6. Nodirbek has it all calculated, attacking the knight and the pawn. If you were to play a move like knight d7, rook h6, and white is winning. But Gukesh snatches this pawn. If you take rook e4 is a draw. So he goes rook e2, finds another amazing move. Rook g5 instantly played. If takes here, knight takes g5 is fine for black. If you take here, take, rook c6 is a draw. So he plays here, rook takes h6. Nodirbek finds the best move. Gukesh saves his knight, knight to c5. They're moving quickly. But Nodirbek is winning here with these pawns. Rook moves to c6. pinning the knight. And so slowly, if you can play king g3, king h4, f4, g5, there's no way that black is going to be able to hold this. One of the things that would be in Gukesh's favor is if the rooks are traded, because then the mating attack against the king is gone. So he plays his rook to a6. And now knight comes back to c5. In comes a check. King f7. Played, bringing the king up. He gives another check. And king f6. The winning idea is very, very subtle here. Rook e8 played. A strong move in the position. And now h6, h7, h8 queen is the idea. But Gukesh has a defense in his mind. He goes knight e6. What a move here by him. A fantastic move. Pawn to h6, pushing the pawn forward. But this is where Gukesh has a trick prepared. Rook e5. And the point is, if h7, there's knight f4 check and the rooks are traded. So he goes rook a6, pinning the knight. Check. The king comes back to f1. And there's another check. And the problem here is, if you go up with your king to g3, then there is rook e2 and it's big trouble time. So that's the reason why Nodirbek comes here, king f1, but he has managed to botch up the position, king f2. His position was really, really good. He played amazing chess, but now the win is gone and he has to take a draw. They shake hands. What an amazing game this was. An absolutely fantastic game. Nodirbek was very close to victory, but he couldn't find the winning line. The winning line, instead of putting his rook on e8, was to play, instead of here, very cool move, h6. And if king g6, rook h8. And now this pawn is protected. So rook d5, rook comes in, threatening here, rook to d7. And here you go, check, king takes h6, g5, king h5. And this beautiful move, rook e1, threatening a mate. And the position is winning here for white, but it was not at all easy to see, and Nodirbek missed it. Even after giving a check here, he still had to play h6, but he didn't do so, and after that Gukesh managed to hold on